Well, good morning everyone and welcome to our first committee meeting since lockdown and indeed our first fully digital committee meeting. I understand Councillor Lane was the only one of us who was ill with COVID, so I'm delighted to see that he has made a full recovery. Before we begin today's meeting, I want to comment on the incredible storm that affected most of Perth and Kinross last week. And as someone who lives in a house affected by water, I fully understand the worry and stress caused by periods of very heavy rain. It is terrifying to watch a wave of water approach your house, and the feeling of helplessness can't be understood by those not affected. We saw the equivalent of a month's rain fall in just a few hours. In fact, there was 42 millimetres of rain in 1 hour in the early hours of the 12th. Many of our communities were adversely affected by this event. So I would like to thank the householders and the communities who rallied round to help themselves and indeed others, and the staff from the Council and Tayside contract who worked all night to assist as many residents as possible in the most horrific of weather conditions. I'm going to ask Barbara Renton for an operational update on the events of last week. Following that update, Barbara will take a few questions on the events of the last 7 days. This is not a specific item on our agenda, rather a short statement on a subject that's of importance to us all. And for that reason, I'll be limiting questions to around 5 minutes. So please keep questions short and to the point and not about individual streets and towns, and I will ask officers to keep their answers brief. Barbara, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Convener. I would also like to add my sympathies to those who have been affected by the severe weather event which took place last week. I asked to do this update due to the level of interest in the flooding and the events that took place last week. During the night of the 11th of August, much of Scotland was affected by significant thunderstorms and heavy rain. The entire Perth and Kinross area suffered extensive rainfall, thunder and lightning for 6 hours from around 11 p.m. on the 11th of August. This severe weather resulted in widespread flooding. The Met Office confirmed to me yesterday that the majority of rain came between midnight and 3 a.m. with, as Councillor Forbes has said, 42 millimetres falling between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in Perth, with a total rainfall in Perth of 86.4 millimetres for the 24-hour period from 6 a.m. on the 11th of August and 6 a.m. on the 12th of August. For the same time period, the Met Office also have a site in Kinross which recorded 61.6 millimetres, although they don't have the hourly breakdown for there. Perth would expect to see 65 millimetres of rain in the whole of the month of August, and the Met Office emphasised to me that 40 millimetres in an hour, therefore, is exceptional. Echoing this, having spoken to council colleagues and those in Scottish Water, the most frequently used words were extreme, significant, and I've never experienced anything like this before. And while that is of little comfort to those affected, it does reflect the enormity of the event. A yellow be aware warning was in place, however, this does not in itself trigger a requirement for special measures to be carried out due to the frequency that they are given and the limited times that they become a reality. No flood warnings were in place from the Met Office. At 11 p.m. on the 11th of August, the yellow warning was upgraded to an amber warning. The council then had 2 roads officers and 2 roads workers on standby, with all calls being taken by the standby contact centre between 5 p.m. on the 11th of August and 8 a.m. on the 12th of August passed to these officers to triage and deal with. More staff were deployed overnight as the scale of the rainfall and flooding became clear. To date, approximately 150 properties have been identified as suffering flooding above floor level. There have also been far more properties affected in a lesser way, i.e. flood water limited to the solum of the property. The breakdown of areas affected were most significantly Perth, with a number of areas across the city, Kinross, Ailith, Dunning and Bridge of Erne. Floodwater built up in Marshall Place, Princes Street and Canal Street in Perth as Scottish Water sewers reached capacity in the area, with houses and businesses being inundated. The floodgates were deployed in the early hours of the morning. Now, around 7 a.m. it was observed that Marshall Place water level had gone up and was increasing, and this was investigated. A 6-inch pump was deployed to Marshall Place at 8 a.m. and started to reduce the level of water, however not as quickly as anticipated. Perth and Kinross supervisor attended again at 9 a.m. and established one floodgate had been missed at the children's play park. He and a colleague immediately waded in chest-high through chest-high water to close this gate and reduce the flow of water onto Marshall Place. We apologise unreservedly for what was human error. A review of the arrangements has already taken place, and the open gate contributed to Marshall Place flooding, but was not the sole factor. This has been confirmed at a meeting with Scottish Water yesterday, with whom we discussed the flooding issues in Perth in great detail. They explained that the levels of rainfall experienced were well in excess of anything that could be dealt with by the sewer system, and that closing the gate would not have prevented the entirety of the flooding in the area. A number of households in Perth had to receive temporary accommodation, and this was organised for us by our housing service. 5 schools had to be closed because of flood damage or water ingress. Early messages went out to parents to ensure abortive journeys were minimised. Officers assessed the damage and worked hard to get schools, or in some cases parts of schools, open in time for the first day of many pupils returning. This included staff of Mighty who worked to ensure that community campuses were open. Both Perth Leisure Pool and Bells have also been seriously impacted by the flooding, and this will be reflected in the recovery and renewal plans, which we have asked all 3 ALIOs to provide. Staff were deployed with sandbags and pumps to protect against flooding from the early hours of the morning of the 12th of August, and senior members of staff visited the main flooding areas to identify what further help we could give and offer support to residents and businesses. Housing staff carried out 100 welfare checks on residents in known affected areas and to see if they needed any accommodation or other assistance. These staff linked with health and social care colleagues for any further support requirements, and our housing repair staff went on site to support residents as well. Leaflets were issued to households providing information on where they can obtain further assistance if required. The flooding team was also deployed to investigate the flooding and identify affected properties. This will allow us to focus on the homes and businesses that most require our help. This work is continuing. The majority of roads closed on the morning of the 12th of August were open and passable with care by the afternoon. 3 roads will need longer term works and diversions have been put in place. Public transport services carried on with minimal disruption due to close working between the public transport unit and the bus operators were very flexible to keep services running. And our property services team responded quickly to 99 calls regarding damage to council buildings, either from the storm or lightning strikes or flood damage. Calls were mainly related to roof leaks flooding from ground level, as well as associated damage to roofs, floors, electrical, mechanical and IT equipment within the buildings. In terms of current action and next steps, the flooding team continue to work with those residents affected to get a realistic picture of what took place over the course of the 11th and 12th of August. This will take time due to the widespread nature of the flooding, and requests for assistance have had to be prioritised, and this is in line with the normal practice that would take place in the event of any flooding. The structures team are continuing to work towards getting the damages on the network repaired as soon as practical, with temporary bridges in place where necessary by the end of this week. We agreed yesterday with Scottish Water that we would undertake joint community engagement events with the affected communities in Perth, and this will be done as far as possible through Teams meetings with the intention that these will take place over the course of the next few weeks. The Scottish Flood Forum is now in Perth and can offer independent advice and support to flood affected residents. Their mobile unit will be located in Edward Street beside the St John's Centre today from 10 AM to 4 PM. Other community engagements events will also take place. We're already in discussion with the Ailith Community Resilience Group about this, and we look to do the same in other areas such as Kinross as soon as practicable as well. We want to better understand from our communities who were impacted by the flooding and discuss next steps, both short and longer term. And as always, we will undertake a full review of the severe weather event. I would like to add my own thanks to those communities and to officers who are all committed to providing the very best service both during the extreme weather event and continue to do the same through the recovery and planning phase. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm open up the floor to a few questions just for 5 minutes or so. If you would like to ask Barbara or any of the other officers a question, could you indicate in the chat box now, please? Okay, it would appear. Oh, Councillor Barnacle has a question. Over to you, please, Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, convener. It was, as Barbara said, a storm of biblical proportions over Perth and Kinross last week, and I personally know of flooded flats in Hospital Street, South Kinross, and on Wednesday the South Inch was a lake. Whilst it is difficult to contain such intense storm effects with our Victorian sewerage systems, one question I would pose to officers is the regularity of drain and gully cleaning in the authority area, particularly in the summer when plant growth often chokes drains and gullies, making flooding worse than it might otherwise be. Could it be possible to have a briefing note on that issue? That's my question.
Stuart, would you like to answer that question, please?
Yes, thanks, convener. Thanks, Councillor Barnacle. We cleanse our gullies biannually, and we record all our data on an electronic system that details when we've been to gullies, so we can actually go back and say when we've cleansed gullies out. Last year, we didn't hit the target of gully cleansing that we'd set ourselves, and we were looking to improve on that this year. We can put together some stats on what we achieve, what we can achieve, and the budget level we've got to cleanse gullies. I would point out, the gully pots themselves are not storage devices for flood water. They're merely there to capture the water and channel it into the pipe network. And although gullies sometimes look as if they're blocked because they're full of water, they're actually intended to have water in them to prevent smells coming back out of them. So they're not all as blocked as perhaps some folk might perceive them to be, although I accept that we do have a number of blocked gullies on the network at any one time.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Councillor Lane is next. Now, if I could just remind, please, councillors and indeed officers, to keep the questions and answers short and to the point, please. Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thanks. It's really to Barbara. I noted that she said that the time that the emergency out of service calls were being taken, well, unfortunately they weren't being taken all that time because we outsourced them to, I think it's Aberdeen, and there was long periods where the phones were ringing out, people concerned residents obviously trying to get through to our emergency number were not getting any response. So I don't think that's acceptable, and I was wondering what you think we can do about that. Should we be outsourcing it to another local authority that can't fulfil what they're supposed to do?
Councillor Lane, after you raised this question with me on Monday, then I've spoken to Stuart Diall about this. It's a rolling contract which will end on the 31st of March. And Stuart is already looking at the effectiveness of the contract, and about any other alternative ways that we can do this. We picked up the issue that you suggested about whether at times in an emergency then we could augment that service, and we're in discussion with IT and with Customer Service Centre to see whether that is at all possible.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Councillor Lane. I'm not seeing any other requests for questions, so we'll give it one last chance for us. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, convener. I'm just wondering if you could give me some indication of how many council houses or council-owned houses have been issued with property level protection.
I don't know if there's anyone from housing here, but perhaps Barbara may have the answer to that. If not, I think we'd have to get back to you. Barbara, do you have the answer?
I don't have that answer, Councillor Williamson, but we will get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any. Sorry?
Convener?
Yes, Councillor Parrott.
Thank you. Sorry, for some reason my queue is failing to send, although everything else seems to be working. Can I ask if, in relation to the gully pots, is it possible for us to work out which are most likely to be affected by flash flooding of the sort we experienced, And is there, or can there be any sort of priority system for concentrating on some of the gully pots more than on some of the others, perhaps? Thank you.
Councillor, thank you very much. I believe that is actually the case. Is that right, Stuart? That we monitor what comes out and use that information?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, the InTouch system that we use, we record the status of the gully when we arrive and the status of the gully when we leave. So we're currently building up a database of which gullies are frequently blocked when we get to them. Once we'll have I think we've got 2 years data now. As we build up that data set, we should be able to target better the ones that require more frequent cleansing and the ones that require less frequent cleansing, and that's the aim of the overall project over a period of years. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't planned on taking any comments on this particular paper, but I see Councillor Ling has asked for a comment. So, Councillor Ling, if it's fairly brief, could we take that comment and then move on immediately thereafter, please? I think you're on mute, Councillor Ling.
Sorry, thanks, convener. It was relating to Councillor Parrott's question, actually. I think he said, was there any way of monitoring how much water goes through each gully pot so we could give them particular attention rather than how often they were blocked? So the question that was answered, the answer I didn't think was actually related to the question.
Okay, thank you. Let's get the correct answer to that from Stuart, and then we'll move on to the main part of the meeting. Stuart, please.
My apologies, I misunderstood the question. There is no way to monitor the volume of water that goes through each gully pot. There's no measuring device within the gully pots, and we can only measure the level of siltation at them when we arrive to cleanse them, and the level of siltation when we leave them.
Okay, thank you, Stuart, and thank you for the questions and comments on that. Let's move into the main part of the meeting now. And for the proceedings today, can I remind everyone that although the protocol for virtual meetings has not actually gone through full council, it has been agreed, I understand, by all political groups. I think it seems sensible that we refer to that for the way we conduct ourselves today. So, as has already been said, can we use the chat box only to indicate questions, comments, etc. Please don't fill the chat box with ancillary information. And remember, as has been advised us already, this is available to anyone who asks for it under Freedom of Information request. Can I ask, please, just one question at a time? If you have more than one question, let me know and I will try, time permitting, to come back round to you again. And can I please ask you, don't make long introductory speeches to questions. Can we just get straight to the questions? I understand we have apologies from Councillor Robertson. I understand Councillor Simpson is substituting for him today. Are there any other apologies or any substitutions? That would appear to be not then. Under the declaration of interest, can I ask if you have a declaration of interest to indicate by typing DI in the chat box? On a personal note, as a member of Tayside Contracts Joint Committee, I'm going to declare a non-financial interest in the paper on winter service. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Williamson?
Like yourself, convener, I have a declaration of interest and non-financial interest with Tayside Contracts.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? Okay, and now can I move on to the roll call? Councillor Bailey has a point of order.
Apologies, it can wait until after the roll call. I forgot we had that.
Okay, thank you. Now, can I move on to the roll call, and I can ask committee services to take the roll call? Can you indicate loudly and clearly that you are in the meeting? We have a, sorry, I'm going to stop and go to Councillor Jarvis, who has a declaration of interest. Councillor Jarvis? Councillor Jarvis?
Yes, sorry, I'm struggling a wee bit. Declaration of interest, a member of Tayside Contracts Board.
Thank you very much. Okay, in the absence of any further declarations of interest, can we move on to the roll call, and can I ask committee services to do the roll call for me, please?
Yeah, good morning, members. So just when I call your name, if you could please confirm that you are present. Councillor Forbes.
Present.
Councillor Baird.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Barnacle.
Present.
Councillor Donaldson.
Present.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor Parrott.
Present.
Councillor Reid. Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
And Councillor Williamson.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now go back to Councillor Bailey, who raised a point of order. Councillor Bailey, can you elaborate on that for me, please?
Certainly, and thank you, convener. I wanted to draw your attention this morning to the fact that item 7 on our agenda today, which is the one about the Winter Festival, has effectively been predetermined by the comments of a senior council officer. Those comments were in the press and on PKC's Facebook page and had the effect of predetermining the matter 5 days before this committee sat to discuss them. I wondered if you could tell us whether you will be withdrawing the paper or bringing forward an amended version of it, which would acknowledge the fact that this is now presented entirely for this committee's noting rather than for a decision point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I am obviously entirely aware of the situation, and I've asked Barbara Renton to make a short statement on exactly that matter just prior to us talking about that paper, and I hope that satisfies your concerns about it.
Thank you, that's good news.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we're going to move on through the rest of the agenda today now. Councillor Stewart approached me a day or two ago with a motion regarding flooding, which he asked to take under urgent business. Him and I and officer spent most of yesterday in discussion about this, and I have agreed to hear Councillor Stewart's motion today. So if I can ask Councillor Stewart to speak to his motion, please.
Thank you very much, convener. I'm not sure, will committee services be circulating the motion to elected members? It should be the version I sent last evening with the word final in the title of the file.
I believe committee services were working on how we could make that happen, so I'll let them, someone, either Kirsten or Christina, please answer that.
Yes, it should just be uploaded now. Okay,
Councillor Stewart, over to you.
Oh, okay. That was there was a that wasn't the actual. That doesn't look like the actual final version that I had advice on from the wording of from officers yesterday evening. But anyway, I'll.
Councillor Stewart, just before we go on, if it's a lot different, we should probably see the correct version, and I'm wondering if someone from committee services has that to hand.
Convener, that was the latest version that we had. I don't think we have anything else.
Okay. Councillor Stewart, can you perhaps then talk through an outline of the
services convener, just so that we've got the right version?
Sorry, Barbara, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm just forwarding the right version to committee services.
Okay. Apologies, members. We'll take maybe just a short couple of minutes while we get this technical issue resolved. So Councillor Stewart is talking about the correct motion. Okay, Councillor Stewart, can you confirm that that is the correct motion that we have in front of us, please?
Thank you, Convener. That looks like the right one.
I'll leave you in to talk to it, please.
Thank you. Convener, members of the committee, thank you for agreeing to hear this urgent motion, and I want to thank officers for advising on the wording. As the Executive Director has outlined at the start of the meeting, some of the rainfall experienced just a week ago in parts of Perth and Kinross was of truly historic and record-breaking proportions. I'm sure that the thoughts of all members of the committee are with our residents and businesses who were particularly affected by this extreme weather, not least the 123 properties, 77 in Perth, 20 in Kinross, 16 in Alyth, 9 in Dunning and 1 in Bridgeverne, where householders had to deal with flooding to the ground floor, and that doesn't include the properties where flooding reached just the basement solum level. And I'm sure all members will want to join with me in thanking Perth and Kinross Council and Tayside's contract staff who did their utmost to help affected householders and businesses in addressing the flooding and clearing up the immediate aftermath. I'd also like to extend thanks to the staff from housing who made hundreds of welfare checks on residents and arranged for emergency accommodation for some residents who required it. And I'd like to acknowledge the speed with which officers have contacted the Scottish Government to access Bellwyn funding to assist with the response to the flooding. But I'm also sure that all elected members will want to extend their highest praise for those in our local communities who went above and beyond to help their neighbours and friends by handing out sandbags, moving furniture, bailing out overflowing floodwaters, and everything else that they did during those scary, frenzied hours in the early morning of last Wednesday. From a narrow perspective, I'd like to single out and highlight the efforts of the 3 young people, 2 girls and a boy, who at 10:30 in the morning of the 12th, last Wednesday, were already out with shovels clearing the silted mess in the young kids' play park next to the burn in Alyth. What we cannot let slip to the wayside, however, is the trauma induced by each succeeding yellow or amber warning for extreme weather, rain or flooding issued by the Met Officer SEPA, especially in those local areas of Perth and Kinross where flooding has hit hardest in the past. When these warnings come, the trepidation is real and present and critical, and the evidence of recent adverse weather events is that local communities anticipate what is to come and respond outstandingly. I would therefore like, as the motion on your screen says, to request officers to review our existing flood schemes and local flood risk management plans to determine what further arrangements on an interim basis may need to be put in place to manage flood risk before the proposed schemes are completed, to review where there are additions required to the list of local flood schemes included in the National Flood Risk Management Plan, and any additions required to the list of actions in our local flood risk management plans. And after hearing feedback from local communities about their experiences and opinions on how to avert or mitigate future flooding, to identify short, medium and long-term actions for the communities that have been infected, and Alyth in particular, and to report back as early as possible with the results of these reviews and with the identified actions for Alyth and other areas to a future meeting of this committee. It is because of that trepidation, the anxiety and in some cases the trauma that these flooding events cause that I bring this urgent motion before committee today. Time and again, when our citizens are called upon to fulfil their social contract, they answer that call, frequently going well above and beyond. Now is the time for us as a council to heed that call and to live up to the expectations of our residents and taxpayers, and I commend this motion to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Barnacle, are you intending to say anything seconding or just formally second?
No, I asked the question before I was going to refer to, so I'm merely happy to second Councillor Stewart's motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up Councillor Stewart's motion to anyone else in the virtual meeting for comments or contributions. If you could type the words or the letter C in the chat box, please. Okay, I'll give it just a few more seconds. Give everyone a chance to press the right button. Councillor Lane, followed by Councillor Barnacle second. Councillor Lane has a comment followed by Councillor Parrott. So Councillor Lane first, please.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I welcome and I'm very happy to support the motion. I would also ask Councillor Stewart if he could incorporate into the review, although we have already had Barbara Renton accept that we review the out-of-hours emergency service as a matter of urgency as well. And I would also like that in future years we have a paper number 6 is the policy of the level of service for winter. Well, whilst that's very important, I would like to see a paper brought for all weather events, high winds, and also for flooding events, and so that the people of Perth and Ross and the local elected members know exactly where our resources to tackle such events are going to be situated and the accessibility of them on an ongoing review as the weather changes year on year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lane. I'm going to ask Barbara if what you suggest is practical. If you don't mind, Barbara, please, and we'll come to Andrew, Councillor Parrott after that.
Yes, we're quite happy to accommodate any review of the out-of-hours service. I think we would need to look at a little bit more detail in terms of the a severe weather report, but I'm assuming from Stuart that is possible as well.
Yeah, yes, Barbara, Stuart here, happy to be involved in that. Yeah.
Thank you, Convener. Can you ask Councillor Stewart if he's happy for that to be part of his motion?
I was trying to do that, but I found myself on mute, so apologies. Councillor Stewart, are you happy for that to be accommodated as part of your motion?
Yes, I hadn't wanted to anticipate what particular actions might need to come forward, but I think given the difficulties that I've heard about, including from Councillor Purvis down in Kinrossshire with local residents unable to access the out-of-hours line for hours from 5 o'clock in the morning last Wednesday, and I'm sure that's the case for other areas. I'd be happy to incorporate that aspect, and if officers are able to provide a general level of service for extreme weather events, or to work towards that at some point in the future, then I'm happy to accept that element of into the motion as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. And just before we move on to Councillor Parrott, can I just check with committee services that on a practical level they would make those changes? Is that how we would make this happen, please, Christina or Kirsten?
Yes, we could make those changes and add it into the motion for putting into the minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Councillor Parrott, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm really speaking in support of what Councillor Lang has said. It's my experience that we're well prepared, if you like, for the winter events that cause considerable or can have the potential to cause considerable disruption, and on occasion some damage as well. But I support this because I think that these more extreme but very localised events that we're getting have the potential both for severe disruption locally, but also a considerable amount of damage, more damage than we tend to get with the winter events. And anything that we can do to be more proactive to those, I think would be helpful. I do recognise, however, that these extreme weather events that might be associated with climate change can be extremely localised. And it is very difficult to work out where they might strike and when, but I would welcome anything that we can do to be more proactive to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Barbara would like to make another comment on this. So Barbara, please.
Thank you, Convener. I would agree with Councillor Parrott, and it's something that we need to link completely to the climate change work that we would be doing as part of the recovery and renewal strand of the work that we're doing under the Perth and Kinross offer. Stuart Diall and I have many frequent conversations about how much we would rather deal with snow than rain, and because of water, because the impact of that can be quite catastrophic for some people and in some areas, and that includes some of the roads that we've got and our structures on some of the roads this time. And I would wholeheartedly agree that the impact of water is much more difficult for us to organise for us to be able to react more quickly than we do for winter, but we will pick those issues up.
Thank you, Barbara, and I think what you've just said is actually coming up in a paper that we'll be discussing just very shortly. And Barbara, I noticed your comment it would be helpful to get the exact wording for the addition to the motion from Councillor Laing. On a practical level, can I ask Committee Services how we actually do that? Because I want to make sure this is done and we don't just plod on through the meeting and not get this resolved.
If Councillor Laing just wants to to say what he wants, we'll include it. At the moment, I have it down as a review of the out-of-hours emergency services to take place. If you could maybe confirm that that's what he wants.
Yes, I want that, definitely that. And the other point was that we look at bringing a paper or include it on the policy of level of service for winter, but have also one for any weather event, so that we as local elected members and people across Perth and Kinross can understand where our resource is going to be allocated in the same way as it is allocated in the winter service paper.
So is that an additional report that you want, or do you want that to be included in the next policy of level of service report that comes back to council?
Whichever is easiest for the officers to facilitate.
Okay.
I'm assuming that incorporating it into an already existing paper would be the appropriate way to go. And Barbara, I see you nodding. I presume you agree with that. Okay. Christina, are you happy that we now understand what Councillor Laing wants and that Councillor Stewart has accepted that, and can we move on?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Laing, are you happy with that?
Yeah, thanks for your perseverance and helping me getting there. Thank you.
And Councillor Stewart, you're happy with that too?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Presume Councillor Barnacle will be happy as the seconder of the motion to.
That was the next thing I was about to ask, and Councillor. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 3 on the agenda today, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which...
Convener, should we just formally agree that I know there are no other comments, but perhaps we should, if I just summed up quickly, we could formally agree it as a motion?
Okay, yeah, if you sum up quickly, we'll just make sure everyone agrees. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. So really, I'm grateful to as I said, to you for allowing this urgent motion to come before the committee today. I'm grateful for the contributions and suggested additions from Councillor Laing and Councillor Parrott. I'm grateful to Councillor Barnacle for seconding the motion. The reason for bringing the motion is really because we cannot leave our communities on their own, although, as I said, they do go above and beyond. We cannot leave our communities on their own to deal with these ongoing situations in the meantime until flood schemes are in place. I recognise, for example, that the Scottish Government works on a 6-yearly cycle of flood risk management strategies and local flood risk management plans. But we have to be able to be more agile, and to that's the point in the wording of the motion about bringing in interim arrangements and reviewing what those interim arrangements are and what additional interim arrangements are required to be able to react and to support our communities in doing the valuable work that they already seek to do for themselves. I'm so grateful to everybody for accepting the motion, and I'll draw my remarks to a close there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Can Sorry, Councillor Stewart, can I just wait for a second to give everyone the chance? If I don't hear anything different, I will assume that we're all in agreement with this. Right, let's move on. Thank you to the minutes. Minutes of the last meeting, which, believe it or not, was the 22nd of January, quite some time ago now. Can I accept it? Can I have agreement that the minute is an accurate reflection of what was discussed? And I'm not sure how I signed the meeting book, but the sort of virtual meeting book. If anyone has a disagreement, can you please say so? Otherwise, I'll assume that we're all in agreement. Okay, I'm going to take that as agreed, and somehow committee services will explain to me how I signed the meeting book at a later date. That takes us on to item number 4. Now, I'm sure, like me, over the last few months, you've been receiving emails from council staff over the weekends, very late in the evening, an indication of just how much work they've had to do dealing with the coronavirus, as well as all the other general activities of the council, while the council is being run by the executive team under emergency powers. I'm going to ask Barbara Renton to just give an outline of the arrangements that took place. So Barbara, if you could take over, please.
Thank you again, convener. I've tried to keep this as short as I possibly can, but it is still quite long, obviously because of the range of activities that come under the remit of this committee. So I'll speak quickly, and just to give you a break, then at some point quite early on into this, I'm going to ask Brian Cargill to talk a little bit about spaces to people, about spaces for people as well. So elected members will already be aware of much of the hard work undertaken by the entirety of housing and environment, either through information provided to council, through the elected member briefings, or through the service sounding board. However, it is only right and proper, though, that at the first committee at the end of emergency powers, that I provide an update on the work of the parts of the service pertinent to this committee. It is impossible to do the whole service justice, and time prevents me from mentioning every team, but I want to thank every member of staff for their hard work, commitment and dedication, not just over the last 4 to 5 months, but during the old normal times as well. We may not always get everything right, but that's not from the lack of effort, willingness and focus on customer services. And obviously I would want to thank you as elected members for your commitment over that period as well, and for our communities who really have stepped up above and beyond, and delivered for their communities and worked in partnership with us as well. The majority of the design team were initially redeployed to support the council's essential services, but with the Scottish Government's announcement about Spaces for People funding, the team prepared and submitted a bid to Sustrans for Spaces for People funding. This was successful, and £1.355 million has been secured to deliver 34 interventions throughout the Perth and Kinross area. So at this point, I'd quite like to ask Brian Cargill to give elected members an update on how this work is progressing.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. As Barbara had mentioned there, we've submitted 2 bids over the course of the last couple of months. The first bid we were successful for, where we received 1.1 million of funding for 34 interventions, and these were spread across the Perth and Kinross area. A further bid was submitted a month or 2 later for 255,000, which again we were successful. And this bid specifically was for 20 mph speed limits in school exclusion zones. And these were both approved, giving us a total award from the Spaces for People funding of 1.355 million. Council officers over the last couple of months have been busy working their way through the delivery of the various measures, and these include, for physical distancing purposes, we've installed footway signs on the footway in Perth, Kinross, Pitlochry, Dunkeld, Bridge of Erne, Auchterarder, Scone and Cooperangus, Aberfeldy, Kenmore and various other boroughs. Crieff and Comrie are about to be installed, but we're in discussions with Transport Scotland and Bear Scotland because the majority of the works are on the A85 trunk road. And the installation of physical distancing footway signs in other areas will continue until they're no longer required. Physical distancing measures are to be provided in Canal Street car park for pedestrians going to and from the car park, and these should appear in the next week or so. We've also introduced temporary footway widening measures on the main street in Pitlochry and 3 areas of Perth. We've also introduced 3 temporary 20mph speed limits, and these have been installed in Perth, in the city centre, in the Muirton area, and also the Perth Royal Infirmary area. And a further 41 temporary 20mph speed limits are currently being installed in various towns and villages throughout the Perth and Kinross area. We've also installed 3 cycling and walking friendly roads in the rural areas to encourage active travel and to make it safer for those who already do so. 2 of these are near Comrie and 1 is at Glenfoot in the Abernethy area. We've installed 1 new permanent token crossing at Charlotte Street in Perth to provide a safer link from the North Inch to the city centre for pedestrians and cyclists. And there will be 1 permanent token crossing to be installed at Marshall Place to provide a safer link from the South Inch to the city centre for pedestrians and cyclists. Road space has also been reallocated in Perth High Street and also in Wellmeadow Blairgowrie to enable safe physical distancing and also to create space for businesses to potentially occupy. Physical distancing measures have also been implemented at Perth Bus Station, at the bus terminus in Wellmeadow Blairgowrie, as well as physical distancing posters have been installed in all bus stops throughout the Perth and Kinross area. Rural queerways have also been implemented on several roads around natural beauty spots to prevent visitors from blocking roads. And a further 4 queerways are planned to be installed later this week and into early next week. Design work is ongoing to introduce 10 new school exclusion zones throughout the Perth and Kinross area, and as part of this, innovative technology is being used to monitor vehicle movements in and out of these schools, and it is anticipated that school exclusion zones will be introduced in September. Directional signage and pedestrian refuge island has been installed in A912 Aberargie to make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists to cross and use the adjacent cycling and walking friendly routes. And work is ongoing to introduce road temporary cycleways within Perth to encourage cycling and to make it safer for those who are doing so. There were initial delays with the procurement of materials, but we are now in possession of these, and we hope to make significant progress in the remaining projects and hope to have these completed in the coming weeks. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Brian. Barbara, was that also the end of your report, or did you have more to say about other things?
You should be so lucky. We've already spoken a little bit about the structures and flooding team, but they continue to undertake their statutory functions, such as inspecting bridges and carrying out emergency repairs, progressing flood studies and flood schemes in line with the published local risk management plan. But they're obviously currently dealing with the after effects of the recent flood event, which has had a severe impact, as we've already discussed, and is their main focus at the moment. Within community green space, there are a number of teams and staff within this area, and now many are involved also in dealing with the impacts of the flood damage over the course of last week as well. But over the course of the last 4 to 5 months, they've continued to update outdoor access and parks advice to public and landowners and deal with numerous walker and landowner issues as a result of a much larger number of people out in the area. And they've also worked with the local access forum on access issues and the traffic and network team on the street design for COVID-19 arrangements, as Brian's just been talking about, and will continue to advise on planning applications. In addition, the team continue to work with the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park and a multi-agency group to coordinate the response to the easing of lockdown. And we're also dealing with this in a similar way on a Perth and Kinross wide basis. They closed and then reopened our play areas in line with Scottish Government guidance, and they've continued to manage external contracts for our old age pensioners, garden maintenance, play area maintenance, street weed killing, verge cutting and pest control. And they're currently reviewing our grounds maintenance to improve biodiversity and the standards in our cemeteries as well. Site inspection continued with increased public usage, outdoor access issues, tree inspections and the installation of related signage. And we've provided updated green space volunteer advice and support to groups for site activities and project development and implementation. And we continue to undertake essential maintenance to the North Inch Golf Course during lockdown prior to the reopening with the new rules, and that's proved to be very popular with significant numbers rejoining and joining for the first time, as well as playing. One of our main essential services identified was bereavement services, and we retrained and retasked new staff to do bereavement administrative work and undertake cremations at the crematorium to ensure that we had capacity if required. And we also introduced a webcasting service to allow mourners to see services online free of charge, and this will continue to be in place as we move forward. The waste strategy team supported colleagues in operations in developing and implementing contingency plans for the closing and then the reopening of our recycling centres and public toilets. And the successful reopening strategy allowed for full operation within our recycling sites within 1 week and for public toilets within less than 2 weeks. And the team are now contacting potential new comfort scheme partners to ensure risk assessments are in place and are currently investigating additional comfort schemes provisions as well. And we're looking at the provision of facilities for motorhome freedom camping and the promotion of appropriate toileting approaches across the area. We investigated fly tipping reports and sent 89 advisory or warning letters and issued 4 fixed penalty notices. We've set up the Fly Tipping Fund to support prevention measures and clear-ups for private landowners and community groups. And to date, we've issued 3 awards and have 3 applications pending. We're also considering the feasibility of a mobile CCTV unit to target hotspots and benefit multiple landowners. We continue to administer the garden waste permit system, which has achieved an income of over £1.3 million to date this financial year, which is above target. And this has only been possible due to the continued operation of and no disruption to our curbside mixed food and garden service. And we supported our commercial waste customers to manage contractual changes. We've undertaken actions within the community welfare workstream, operational and transitional plans related to the food distribution hub and the establishment of the food share network for Perth and Kinross. The Roads Maintenance Partnership continued to carry out statutory functions incumbent on the Council under the Roads Scotland Act, and these have been less extensive with our planned programme of safety inspections suspended as part of the Scottish Government route map, and we've instead targeted inspections being carried out to ensure the safety of the travelling public. Defects picked up during these inspections, defects notified by the public have continued to be repaired. We've continued, as I said already, a full provision of domestic uplifts throughout the lockdown, with early work undertaken to ensure the health and safety and well-being of our staff in line with physical distancing measures, which required retasked staff to support and to drive support vehicles. And we undertook the full provision of all our bin collections, which was not the case for many other local authorities. There has been a partial provision of street sweeping duties, with staff being utilised to augment other services, but we've now started to operate a limited mechanical sweeping in town centre barrows where we can, whilst continuing to support waste collection and bereavement. Initially, grounds maintenance staff were used to supplement street sweeping and refuse, with all areas, large areas of grass cut to keep parks, open spaces and cemeteries open so that they could be used by the public exercising while maintaining social distancing. We've undertaken the cutting of old age pensioner gardens, as I've already mentioned, as we felt that this was the only open space that many of these householders could access. And we've begun to undertake limited weed control utilising support vehicles from other services, but we've not as yet commenced handwork. Prior to the Aberdeen COVID cluster, regulatory services had been carrying out advisory visits to hospitality sector premises to assist businesses with compliance with the coronavirus regulations, and to cover as large an area and visit as many premises as possible. The trading standards, animal health, food health and safety and environmental health teams have been utilised, with each team principal allocated 1/3 of Perth and Kinross. To date, the interventions have been carried out to over 500 premises, and the greatest majority of businesses are in compliance, with most of the remainder then complying after advice. Trading standards continue to offer help to the vulnerable with installation of true-call filter devices to prevent scammers gaining access to bank account details of the most vulnerable people within Perth and Kinross. And the animal welfare team are experiencing a spike in dog attacks and are concentrating the available resource on this rather than dog fouling. And the food team have been carrying out tabletop visits throughout on instruction from Food Standards Scotland and are preparing to be fully operational by mid-September. I would like to add my thanks to committee services who've made, sort of many of the meetings that we've had, sort of over the last 4 to 5 months possible, along with our IT colleagues, but also to Christina Flynn and a couple of other colleagues who have maintained and supported the elected member system of inquiries, which certainly have had very good feedback, so thanks to them as well. And last but not least, our parking services team have now returned to normal duties after spending their time supporting our welfare approach with food and pharmacy deliveries, as well as a range of other support activities to ensure that our residents were safe and well. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Barbara. I'd just like to echo some of what you said, and I think that most of our constituents would have absolutely no idea what goes on behind the scenes in a local authority, but I think most of them would accept that in a time of crisis, as we've just experienced, and indeed continuing to experience, then we require a local authority that's well run and well managed to support us. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to all of the employees at Perth and Kinross Council, particularly in the Environment Infrastructure Service, for the work that they have done over the last few months. This is not technically a part of the agenda, but I understand it's an area that members will have a lot of interest in. So I will open up to questions, but I'm going to be very firm. I want the questions, please, to be just straight to the point and quick questions. And again, I'm going to limit this to around about 5 minutes. And I see Councillor Stewart has the first question. So Councillor Stewart, if you could carry on and make your question quick and to the point. And to officers, can you make your answers quick and to the point as well, please?
Thank you, Convener. It was 2 questions on the spaces for people. The first, whether the plans for the spaces for people had been invited for, whether community councils had been invited to consult on them or just been told what those spaces for people plans would be. And second, I wonder if officers would recognise that one of the consequences of setting, including a pedestrian cycle in all of the traffic lights, is that even when nobody wants to cross the road, traffic is brought to a stop, thus potentially increasing congestion and air pollution in certain of particularly the city centre areas.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm assuming Brian Cargill is probably going to answer that question. Please, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Thank you, Convener. A couple of questions. The first one, with all the measures that we proposed, initially we consulted with all the elected members in all the wards, and then we followed that up with consultation with the community councils. Albeit we were working to a very, very tight time scale. There was the initial pot of funding was £10 million, and 32 local authorities were competing for that. And granted, it was increased to 20 million, by 20 million to 30 million. We were all competing for that. We endeavoured where we could to engage as much as we could, but we're working on a very tight timescale. We did take on board a number of requests and additional measures from elected members and from community councils. So I think we endeavoured to do as best we could from an engagement point of view. The second question, or the 2 questions that followed about the push buttons in Perth City and the other boroughs, I think it was a balance of risk at the time. The guidance and advice and from public safety, we did switch off the buttons and put a dedicated phase in for pedestrians. Our discussions with our air quality colleagues indicate that the air quality levels, there is no noticeable increase as such due to what would appear to be additional stops for vehicles. Again, we're in a period where we're nowhere near the level of traffic that we had pre-COVID. So again, as it stands just now, the balance of risk, we feel it's safer to have the push button unable to be used by pedestrians and to have a dedicated phase. So I think as we stand just now, we don't intend to change that, but it can be changed at any point going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williamson, and can I just also please remind councillors, Councillor Stewart sneaked in a second question there when I was otherwise distracted. Can I ask please just one question at a time and keep them short, and can I also ask officers to keep the answers as short as possible? Councillor Williamson, please.
Yeah, just picking up on one of the questions Councillor Stewart asked about the social distancing measures that have been put into the boroughs. I was wondering if there are going to be any plans to actually go back into the communities where these things have been installed, just to see how they're working and how they are interacting with the businesses, and what tweaks and changes might be required.
Brian, I presume you can answer that, please.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Williamson. At present, we're working all the hours to try and deliver the remaining measures that we intend to deliver, but absolutely we have no problem at all either receiving feedback from communities or from members, and if we do get that feedback, we're happy to amend and add or remove if required. I think the practicalities of being to be able to go back in and monitor and survey is quite difficult, so we'd rely on local knowledge to allow us to make any tweaks that are required.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. My question is also for Brian in relation to 20-mile-an-hour limits. I've raised two issues with him by email. One, both in relation to the Crooked Devon Drum area, one a new area and one an extension of an area which is also related to the school exclusion zone at Fossaway Primary, where there are concerns on the diversion of vehicles. Is he aware of these? And I'm not necessarily asking for an answer today. I'm happy to speak to him tomorrow if that's convenient.
Brian, would that suit you to just contact Councillor Barnacle directly?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all, Convener. No problem.
Okay.
Councillor Barnacle.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall, please.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to all the officers for all the work that they've done. I noted in your comments, Mrs Renton, the cross-body work with Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, and obviously that was into dirty camping, which is causing a big issue, which is now extending out to Glenturret and also up the Knock. I was just asking, is there any way in looking forward to community wardens or bringing in some form of community assistance in that, and is that something that the council will be willing to look at?
We already have a multidisciplinary team looking at this. They are on duty every weekend. That includes, sort of work that we're doing across the council, so that our parking attendants, the current community warding and Safer Communities team, local people, we have some loch wardens who are involved in that, along with Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. What we are then doing is looking at, we've asked a question about whether it was possible to change quickly, some of the bylaws. It's a very long process. That would be, one of the things that we would really like to do. But we're looking at how we can introduce some of those, but it is a very long process. But we're working with the National Park and to see how they had done that as well. So we're looking at a number of activities and a number of things that we can do while promoting the message. And the most important message is about people actually doing, what they should be doing and respecting the countryside, taking their rubbish home, and actually respecting, the people who live in the area as well. So that's a big part of our activity too. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And Councillor Lane next, please.
Thanks very much, Convener. It's just following on exactly from Councillor McCall's comments. I was wondering what extra financial resource the administration would wish to put into mitigating, especially in my ward, the effects of the promotion of the Heart 200, which runs along now one of the worst affected areas. This was put forward and it was perfectly foreseeable that if more people come, there'd be more littering, more inconsiderate parking and that, and without any financial backup. I was wondering if you or the administration had any plans to put money in to mitigate the effects of the Heart 200.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. As you know, we'll almost certainly, in fact, we will most definitely be all of us looking at our budget proposals again over the coming months. That's something that your ward colleagues have raised with me through our group already, and we'll be having some thoughts and making some decisions on that as what we put forward in our budget proposal when the time comes. And speaking of one of your ward colleagues here, we have Councillor Jarvis. I hope we have Councillor Jarvis. Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Parrott and then come back to Councillor Jarvis, please. Okay, do we have Councillor Parrott available?
I'm just here.
Sorry, Councillor Parrott, can you go first and we'll come back to Councillor Jarvis after you?
You want me to go first?
If that's okay.
Yep,
we seem to have trouble getting hold of Councillor Jarvis, so we'll come back to her.
Thank you. There was a comment about traffic levels not having returned to normal. I'm wondering if officers can give an indication by virtue of a simple percentage as to post the return of schools, what sort of percentage of normal with regard to traffic levels are we seeing? Thank you.
Brian, I presume would be the correct person to answer this.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Parrott. We don't have specific percentages or stats as it stands just now. There are significant increases. It's quite noticeable. We're in the process of gathering information, so within the next couple of weeks we'll be in a position to give a better indication of what the levels are. But it's quite clear if anybody who visits the centre of Perth just now, the numbers have increased significantly.
Thank you, Brian. And Councillor Jarvis, are you available with your question, please?
I am. For some reason, my microphone wouldn't unmute. My question is quite parochial, and it's to do with the clearway up at Loch Clooney. Is it too early to have any feedback about just exactly how successful this has been? And in the broader picture, I assume we'll be getting a report to a future committee about how successful all the implementation has been of the 20-mile-an-hour limits and anything else that's been, in place.
Brian, I'm assuming once again all the questions are for you over this topic. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Councillor Jarvis, and thanks, Convener. The Clooney Loch certainly is one of the locations that we've had problems with vehicles parking, not just on the road but on the verges, and that there are a number of other locations throughout the Perth and Kinross area. We're actively introducing additional clearways to hopefully deter this practice, and it would appear on a weekly basis another one seems to pop up. With regards to the spaces for people measures, yes, at present we're still in the process of implementing these, but we would be more than happy to come back with almost a debrief of what we've done, what has worked and what hasn't worked. I think what's important is that we have the ability to very quickly implement TTROs, which is temporary traffic regulation order. Now these run for 18 months, so we have the ability to let these run for a period of time. We also have the ability to remove them if they don't work. So it's an ongoing process, and we're kind of relying on community feedback to keep us in tune as to what's happening on the ground. But we're happy to come back with a report in due course.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you, because I mean, Clooney Loch was a particularly difficult one, and what was going on today was really quite shocking. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jarvis. I'm just going to ask Councillor Lane. He says Anne is not in place yet in the chat. Can you just explain what that means?
I missed that. Sorry,
you put Anne is not in place in the chat.
So, no, Anne, it is not in place yet. It was.
Oh, sorry.
It was referring to the clearway.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Lane. Right, I misread it.
Sorry, Convener. Anne was asking for an update on how effective it was, and I was just letting her know that it isn't actually in place yet.
Okay, thank you. I misread your comment. I was looking for clarity. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, I thought it was because I mean there was some debate about just how extensive it should be. Right. Okay, I look forward to it going in very quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll draw that room to a close.
Convener, can I ask a question? I've tried numerous times in the chat box to key in question, and it just keeps coming up failed to send. So could I just ask one question?
Councillor Stewart, Of course you can, and hopefully we'll get someone from IT. Sorry, Councillor Donaldson, my apologies, and hopefully we'll get someone from IT to try and get this resolved for you, but please go ahead with your question.
And I'm also going to ask a question on the next paper on the Community Environment Challenge Fund. Okay. First of all, I very quickly, I hear what Barbara Renton's saying about the National Park, and it's very important, the issue of the bylaws, but I want to ask a specific question about Crete. It's under Spaces for People, the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I did ask, I think it's 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, and it's to Brian Cargill, is any consideration being given to extending the 20-mile-an-hour limit trial speed zone to include the East High Street, the junction of Dollery Terrace, and also basically up as far as the British Legion, because it really, I would say to him, that makes sense to include that with the rest of the High Street, and it can be monitored at the same time. That's
Brian,
me.
I guess that's... Thank you. Brian, can you take that, please?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Stewart, thanks, Convener. As I said, we're currently in discussions with Transport Scotland and Bear Scotland, because I think the majority of the measures that we had initially proposed are on the trunk road, so that's why there's been a delay at that end. We're happy to consider extensions to the measures, whether that's the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit or the signs on the footway. So if it's okay, out with the meeting, if I can just specifically pin down exactly what you're looking for, and we can have those discussions with Transport Scotland and Bear Scotland.
Thank you for that, and I will send you on the email I sent, as I say, I think it's about 3 weeks ago, may have been 4, and Brian, I will give you the details, just what we're looking for, because it makes logical sense to tie in that area where there's narrow pavements with the rest of the High Street. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Brian, and thank you everyone for your questions and the officers for their answers. Well, I'll draw this to a close now. Can I assume that we are happy to note this? Unless I hear otherwise, I will take that as an assumption that we're all happy to note it. Okay, thank you, everyone. Can I ask, if you are not speaking, could you put your microphones onto mute? And that will take us now on to paper number 5. I'll ask Vice Convener Councillor Baird to take over with this paper. Vice Convener Baird.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. We now move on to paper 5, which is all about something we've been talking about quite a lot today, the community and the environment. So I'd like to invite Andy Clegg to introduce this paper, please.
Councillor Baird. Yes, it's been another successful year for the Community Environmental Challenge Fund, very popular fund, raising about £7 for every pound of council money put into it. It's enabled a great number of worthwhile projects, including support for the Solheim Cup, and the list of projects is shown in the appendices. Some groups, however, have been increasingly using in-kind contributions from the match funding element of it.
And Andy, we're not hearing all that very well. You seem to be kind of fading a wee bit. I think you might need to go near your microphone or something.
Okay. Some groups are increasingly using the in-kind contributions for the match funding element. And whilst we're okay with that, we would prefer to see a larger proportion of the match funding as actual external funding to maximise the benefits of the council funding. So we're suggesting a change in emphasis in the guidance to allow for that. We're also keen to clarify that any funding, Community Environmental Challenge funding that goes into projects, those projects should be accessible to the public. And we just wanted to clarify that in the new guidelines as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got any questions for Andy on this report? Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just to remind you that Councillor Donaldson had said that he had a question on this, but it was having trouble with his chat function. I think what I... Sorry, I think what I would like to ask...
Councillor Stewart reminding me, but yes.
Thanks. I think what I would... I'm not entirely clear about given that the match funding awarded is £94,000 versus an available sum of £100,000. I'm not sure what problem we're quite trying to solve here. I wonder how many previously funded projects would not have received funding had these criteria been approved.
Andy, can you answer that question?
Yes, thanks, Vice Convener. Thanks, Councillor Stewart. It's not that we wouldn't have funded the projects. We're just putting a preference on projects that have an increased amount of actual cash funding that's going into it, as well as the council funding. There haven't been that many, but we've seen an increasing number of applications just using the in-kind contributions rather than adding cash to the project. So whilst we're happy to have that, our preference is and would be for projects with additional cash funding going into them.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, I'll take your question now.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Councillor Stewart as well for pointing out. Also thanks to Andy Clegg. With this report, I infer, and hopefully given that this fund will continue into the future, and I think that's important, hopefully given budgetary constraints. But what I do want to ask of council officers is how much they view this fund as an integral part of the Perth and Kinross offer, and is it a fund that actually going forward in terms of community engagement we can actually, and participation, is a fund actually we could be building upon?
Thank you for your question. Andy, have you anything comment? Can you answer that?
Yes, thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks, Councillor Donaldson. Yes, it very much fits with the Perth and Kinross offer. It very much sort of encourages communities to work for themselves, but with support from the council. So I would say, you know, it is a very important part of that that Perth and Kinross offer concept.
Could I just follow up? I think the important thing with this fund is the leverage it can deliver. You know, I'll be local for a moment and say, for instance, the Crieff Christmas Lights Committee, it's a ratio of 2. If it takes something like the Schiehallion Footpath project, which is a major project, is a ratio of 10. So it really can lever in additional funds, and we need those funds. What I would like to ask, though, as a specific point, is the time period for completion is 2 years. Given, you know, the last 6 months, is there going to be some leeway on that if projects are not fully completed within the 2 years from the date of grant application? That's me.
Thank you. Andy, can you answer that question?
Yes, thanks, Vice Convener and Councillor Donaldson again. We haven't actually encountered that problem yet in terms of communities coming back to us to say that they can't spend the money, but obviously I think we would look very sympathetically on any particular projects that were underway that were affected by COVID. We'd need to just discuss that with finance colleagues to make sure that was possible.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. A lot of community groups utilise this fund to as a starting point, using the council as a starting point. So can you give me an idea, Andy, on how this will work in reality? Will they be able to still get an agreement or an authorisation that they would get access to funds while waiting for a match funding? Can you just give me an indication of how this will work in reality, please?
Yes, thanks, Councillor McCall. I mean, most of the funding offers are conditional on the other funders providing their funds. So if we award our money, then obviously they've got the 2 years to allow them to secure the rest of the funding and implement the project, which we think is a fair period of time for them to do that. So as long as they can indicate that they have a reasonable chance of getting particular types of funding, that shouldn't be a problem, and it certainly hasn't been to date.
Thank you.
Councillor Mike Williamson.
Thank you, Kathleen, Vice Convener. My question is about councillors' input. When community groups come forward to councillors and ask for their approval for their project, I was wondering if we can maybe try and standardise some of the information that they are providing, because some community groups are very, very good at providing information about their projects and some of them aren't. And I'm just wondering if we could just encourage them to give as much information as possible, or if we could try and standardise that.
I think that's probably sort of more a comment and maybe a conversation you have to have with the individual groups, and because all projects are slightly different and maybe need more information than others. So I don't know if there's a definitive answer to that, in my opinion.
I would prefer an office to answer that, Vice Convener. My question was, is there a way we can get this standardised a lot better so that the information that is being delivered by community groups isn't just please give us the money to the extent, the lowest end to the highest end, where people are requesting the money and giving you quite a lot of detail. I just feel that there should be, we don't get to see the application forms that are being presented by community groups to officers, and maybe perhaps we should be able to have sight of those.
Andy,
thanks, Vice Convener. Thanks, Councillor Williamson. Yes, we do have a standardised application process with standardised information on it. Obviously, there's quite a bit of detail there, but we'd be happy to maybe have a look as a team, see if we can summarise some of that for councillors, if that would be helpful. Or obviously we could provide the whole application form, but they are quite lengthy.
Thank you. Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Yeah, I think that, just to comment on that earlier point, I think a summary of the applications for elected members would be good. But my question relates to specifically, if Andy knows, to the Crosswell Fountain in Kinross, which is used as a planter. This is a 130-year-old fountain. It's a huge feature, and I think they commissioned a report to assess the condition. I wondered whether he knew whether the possibility of restoring it as a water feature as such had been discussed in the application. That obviously that would be more expensive, but does he know that?
Sorry, Councillor Barnacle, I don't know that, but we could certainly find out for you and let you know.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's fine, thanks.
Thank you very much for the questions, and thank you very much, Andy, for answering the questions. If there are no further questions, I will move this report with a few comments. The Community Challenge Environmental Fund is exactly what it says. Communities in 9 of the 12 wards last year challenged themselves to make a difference to the environment in their community, not just for today and for the future. I think that's the important part of this. It's not just a quick fix, we'll do this now, but there's the ongoing maintenance. During last year, some of the projects slowed down due to COVID-19, but previous projects have been much appreciated by all who have been outdoors a bit more. And the additional criteria as outlined at point 2 is what we are asked to note and approve. And this will maybe make it easier for communities to know exactly what they're supposed to help from the council, and also help in kind and help from other organisations. I'm happy to move the report. Have I a seconder? Councillor Forbes?
I'm very happy to second this report. Thank you, Councillor Baird.
Thank you. Any further comment? Any comments on the report? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. Prior to committee, I sought reassurance and gained reassurance about the effect on in-kind support, but I really want to reiterate that. I certainly agree that in-kind support should relate directly to the project involved and not to more general in-kind support to a group. but in-kind support essentially might be seen as being volunteer labour or effort, and that to me is key to certain aspects of the Perth and Kinross offer, and I wouldn't want valuable in-kind support seen in any way as second place to other forms of match funding, which the proposal at 2.2 might be seen as putting it as second place, but I've been reassured that it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simpson.
Very much indeed, Vice Convener. I just wish to comment particularly on how helpful and innovative the help has been from council officers in dealing with the Schoon in particular, and I hope that the success there would encourage other groups to work with the council officers to take their advice and to get in early, because it certainly does work. And on this occasion, Dave Stubbs and his team are to be congratulated on bringing off a very good refurbishment of a community asset.
Thank you very much, Lewis Simpson. I'm sure the officers will be delighted to hear that too. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Vice Convener. As you've stated, this fund has proved to be extremely useful for a wide variety of community initiatives over the years. In the past year, our fund has helped to finance over £675,000 worth of projects across Perth and Kinross. Looking forward, I think it is important that we continue to make best use of these public funds and support the projects where organisations are not just relying on funds from the council, but are contributing themselves through fundraising, donations or other grants to make them happen. Consequently, I support the proposed changes for preferences to be given to projects which contain elements of financial match funding. This will help our funds go further and help the organisations probably to appreciate the projects more. At the same time, it won't rule out the value of projects that rely heavily on in-kind contributions. Can I thank Mr Clegg for his report, and I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I think all councillors across the chamber, or I don't know, across our living rooms and offices in Perth and Kinross, I suppose we have to say these days. I think all members welcome the innovative approach and the support offered by the Community Environment Challenge Fund. My comment was really just a presentational one in terms of the report. We're being asked to clarify, agree additional criteria, and we can see what those additional criteria are. I think it would maybe be helpful if we could see the complete set of criteria in terms of everything, all of the steps that an application has to make at one time, rather than having to sort of refer back to presumably there's a prior committee report with the previous criteria. So it'd be maybe useful after the meeting if officers could circulate the full set of criteria with these included.
I note your comments, Councillor Stewart. Any further comments? Well, thank you very much for all your positive comments about this report, and I look forward to seeing further projects involving the communities which are open for all members of the public to enjoy. So thank you very much. Thank you. I will now pass back to the convener. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Councillor Baird. That takes us on to the next paper, which is the policy and level of service for winter. And I will ask Stuart to introduce his report and to take any questions on it. Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. Before I introduce the paper, can I point out an error in Appendix 1, page 49, where the reference to the night shift in Blairathon and Aberfeldy should have been removed. The length of night shift routes in Appendix 2A has been altered, but my apologies for this oversight in Appendix 1. Across Perth and Kinross Council, there's a variety of arrangements for winter service on our public roads. Around 910 kilometres or 37% of the council's 2,500 kilometres of network is designated as having a high priority for winter service and is treated as required 7 days per week. Most other routes are treated between 8 AM, 3 PM as resources will permit, and we also treat 17% of our footway network as a Category 1 priority. Last winter was milder and wetter than the average. It was around 2 degrees C above the seasonal norm, and as it was also wetter, that operationally resulted in many nights where the road surface might or might not have dipped below freezing and the surface being wet, requiring us to do more frequent gritting as a precaution. As a result, we carried out more treatments compared to both the previous winter and also the 7-year average. This wasn't a result of poor forecasting by our service provider, just the difficulty of predicting the road surface temperatures to that level of accuracy in a winter of that type. Our stand downs and morning crews increased as a result of the wet marginal freezing forecasts, where we required drivers to report to depots just in case it dipped below freezing, but subsequently they were not required. Very cold but dry weather gives fewer challenges to manage than forecasts of plus 2 or 3 degrees and wet, but cold weather tends to linger in the memory as being a worse winter among the general public. There were also only 10 days of snow ploughing, which we measure as being treatment across 50% of the network, and again that's the second lowest recorded data in the past 7 winters. This also tends to be a gauge used by the public to determine the severity of the winter. However, as detailed above, a wet winter increases the level of activity that we have to carry out and also the outturn cost of that winter service. It should also be noted that our forecasts and planned activity are based on road surface temperature and not air temperatures, as news forecasts are. Surface temperatures are generally colder than the air temperatures. A total of 18,681 tonnes of salt was spread against an average of 19,412 tonnes over the last 7 winters. Again, as a result of retreatments following rain washing the salt away, this increased the level of salt usage. The average is, however, skewed by the 30,000 tonnes that was spread during the beast from the east. The 1920 winter was the second most expensive over the last 7 winters at 4,321,000, with only winter 17-18 exceeding this cost. The main factors that influenced the cost were as described above in relation to the retreating of the network due to wash off of the salt and the marginal temperatures. It is always prudent to review and evaluate arrangements for dealing with winter, as we never know when the next severe one will occur, but we need to keep an eye on efficiency and cost. This year's winter period is proposed to run from the 19th of October until the 4th of April, which is a 12-day delay in the start of the winter period, and that's down to our experience in the trend of winters being slightly later. As a result, we'll go straight into the winter period with 11 vehicles available, as opposed to previously we used to start with 4 vehicles available for 2 weeks. This phased approach is not new, it's just tweaked to reflect the weather patterns that we're experiencing. The change made last year by bringing the full period forward a week delivered the dedicated resource we required and will remain unchanged for this year. 2 additional night shift gritting routes were introduced in 2018 and noted as untested in last year's winter report, and again they did not receive a full test due to the type of weather we received. It is however proposed that we revert to 4 night shift routes, where we can see a demonstrable benefit in the network. As an example, the Abersfelde night shift, which might strike you as the most beneficial, we were required to treat the network 49 times out of the 103 before the night shift started. This is an additional cost to the winter service and to a degree negates the benefits that we get through treating it through the night. Because of the wet surface and forecast freezing temperatures before 11 o'clock was why we had to come out early and treat these areas of network. It also attracted only 2 volunteers to resource it, resulting in a week on, week off, and there was little resilience if one of the drivers took ill or had another reason for not being at work. It is also intended to remove one of the Perth night shifts and combine both routes by deleting sections that we complete as ancillary to the priority network. But reverting to 4 night shifts also proposed to remove the night controller role and instead covered by a call to a standby supervisor. Actual contact between drivers and controller hasn't been as much as anticipated, and the need to alter the action plan derived at lunchtime has been rare. Similarly, the drivers and out of a much smaller cohort, a supervisor has been taken out of the equation weekly in terms of daily availability for winter and other ongoing road maintenance activities. Grit bins are provided for use on public roads and not on private property or paths, and we endeavour to keep these full. However, with over 1,300 in place, it is a challenge to do so. Council officers do not inspect these bins to monitor grit levels, and if a grit bin needs to be refilled, we ask that members of the public report this via the Council's website using the My PKC service. The Farmers Assistance is a valued part of our winter service delivery, and if any elected members know of farmers willing to assist, we'd be happy to get their details and make contact with them to discuss further. 6 additional push-along barrows were issued last winter for public use, and a further 14 will be made available to members of the public or community councils wishing to assist grit footways or cul-de-sacs that we don't routinely get to. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for that introduction, and we've got questions piling in already. And first up is Councillor Williamson, followed by Councillor McCall. Councillor Williamson, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question is about the prioritisation of our routes. We tend to, it looks as though we prioritise our routes from A roads through to B roads, and I was just wondering if Stuart could give me information about how frequently is that is reviewed.
Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Williamson. We do a cursory look annually, and we invite comments from elected members with proposed changes to the routes. There is obviously a finite resource that we've got to add on, so we very often have to look to take something off to add something that's perhaps deemed to be a more essential route to cover. So we're happy to do that annually. In terms of within your own ward, Councillor Williamson, we did look at it quite closely this year because we were looking to remove the night shift route. So we did cover that quite closely and altered the routes to reflect that. We do concentrate on the A's and B's, and that ties in with our monthly inspections as being deemed to be the most critical routes on the network. But we're happy to take on suggestions at any time from any elected members with a review to making the routes more efficient or add additional benefit to the communities.
Thank you, Stuart. I was wondering if it's possible, given the answer you've just given me, whether it would be beneficial to councillors to maybe get an education session with the network management team about the gritting priorities, etc., and maybe some of the newer technologies that may be available to help assist you in directing your resources to where they're more appropriate.
Stuart, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Williamson, could you just clarify, do you mean in predetermining the routes or actually being out on the routes providing the service?
No, I mean in predetermining, Stuart, what I was looking for was something where hopefully we could do it remotely, but essentially giving us ideas about where we could better invest our finances as councillors on some of the newer technologies, perhaps, and possibly looking at how you do your job across the network management, and just giving us a better guidance on how your resources are used, etc., and as I say, how we can better invest in them to make the most of those resources as money becomes tighter.
Yeah, yes, happy to look at putting information out there to you to further advise how we go about it. We did, I work quite closely with colleagues in Dundee City and Angus Councils in terms of road maintenance. We have a road maintenance strategy group, and Dundee City Council were looking at a route optimisation process for their own routes, and they had a consultant involved in looking at the routes. We tagged on the back of that just to get an indication from them as to whether they thought a form of computer modelling would assist us. It was very limited feedback we got on the basis of a limited request, if I'm being honest. But the feedback was that in our more rural routes, there's not a huge benefit in route optimisation, but there is in the more urban based routes where we're going over perhaps the same road on more than one occasion. We looked at some of the Perth City routes just to test that theory, and we did establish that we were traversing Dunkeld Road 4 times, and we tweaked the route so that we're now only going over the route twice by necessity to get to other elements of the route. We were only gritting it once, even though we're going over it 4 times, but we're now only covering it twice as opposed to the 4. So there is benefit in making the routes more efficient by looking at it that way, yeah.
So you'd be okay to set up a question and answer session for councillors outside of this meeting, so as I say, we can get a better idea of what's around the corner from you going forward. Is that okay to set that up?
Yes, happy to set that up, Councillor Williamson, yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think I'm going to ask if Barbara would like to comment on that. I'm just very slightly nervous that we may be straying from strategic into operational matters. And Barbara, do you have any comment you'd wish to make on what we've just discussed?
I think, I mean, the report makes it clear, as previous year reports have, that, you know, sort of we always ask elected members for their feedback on routes and the effectiveness of the service. So I think that, you know, sort of that's an extension, what Councillor Williamson is suggesting is an extension of that, and it just allows a little bit more clarity for you as elected members in setting the strategic direction.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Are you happy with that, Councillor Williamson?
Yes, perfectly. I think Barbara was a bit more eloquent than I was. Thank you.
I'll not comment on that. Next question is from Councillor McCall, and she will be followed by Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the report. Thank you, Stuart. We've already spoken about flooding, and there seems to be a move from cold and snowy winters to wet and excess water related issues. What preemptive work can we carry out in autumn time, maybe to minimise blockage to gutters, gullies and drains? I know that's already been briefly spoken about today. And if we did move it forward to a sort of autumn type event, would that be covered in this budget provision for winter services?
Stuart, can you answer that?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor McCall. Yeah, as we've already discussed, we empty our gullies biannually. We've got around 44,000 gullies across the network within Perth and Ross Council, and we empty them throughout the course of the year. We would need to bring in additional resources, but we could look to increase the targeting of emptying these gullies in the autumn months, just to get an advance of the poor weather and prevent surface water that can't get into the systems freezing as we go through the winter. We could look to do that, but we would need to bring in an additional resource, because we tend to use the resource we've got throughout the course of the full financial year.
Does that answer your question, Councillor McCall?
Yes, I'm thanking everybody on mute. My apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff, followed by Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. I have 2 questions. I'll ask one now, and you can bring me back in again if there is time at a later stage.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Could you put another question request in the box then, just to keep me right, please?
Yes, thank you.
The first question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I note the proposed removal of the night shift route from Aberfeldy and Perth, and the explanation for that, and also the plan to cover these routes using a different but existing method. I'm just looking for some assurance from Mr. Dahl, for my comfort and that of local residents in Highland Perthshire, that there won't be any loss of service coverage for these routes using this different system.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. No, we'll be treating exactly the same length of the network, just on an early morning basis as we would have treated on the overnight service. It just means we'll treat it with 2 gritters in a shorter period of time than the 1 gritter through the night time. It'll also let us do a pre-grit in the afternoon / early evening without carrying the cost of a night shift coming in to do a route that's already been treated because it was going to freeze before they got there.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you for that assurance.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Simpson, followed by Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks very much indeed, Convener. My question relates to paragraph 2.13 on page 7. and the communities who are helping themselves with in various ways to keep the footways clear. And I wonder if it would be possible to provide us with a briefing note to have a list of where this is happening, with perhaps some case studies and learning points, in order that we could use this to encourage others to undertake this worthwhile work.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yes, we can certainly get a list out to all elected members detailing where the offer has been taken up by the communities, and indeed there's a lot of individuals that came in and provide that service for their fellow residents. But we can get a list to all elected members. That's not a problem.
Thank you, Stuart. And next is Councillor Barnacle, followed by Councillor Lane.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, it's a couple of questions again on the same issue of self-help, really. Picking up on Councillor Simpson's request for a briefing note, I think that's really valuable, and I would value it because I note in Appendix 2, which is on the footways, that we have no coverage for footways in Crooked Devon or Kinneswood or Scotland Well. I'm a bit concerned about that, and I think I've raised this before. I don't know whether the examples are limited, and in fact they are included. Perhaps Stuart could confirm that. And the second point is picking up on the briefing.
Councillor Barnacle, can I hold you on your second point? Let's get Stuart's answer to your first one, then if you don't want to the second question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stuart, please.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Yeah, in the appendix it is just a sample of the type of thing we do. Crooked Devon and Kinneswood are both covered in terms of footway gritting. The footway gritter comes out of the Kinross depot and works its way out through the settlements to out along the A977 and also up through Milnathort and out towards Kinneswood.
Thank you, Stuart. And Councillor Barnacle, if you don't mind, just so I treat everybody exactly the same, could I ask you to stick another question request on the bottom, and I'll come round to you in the normal order, if that's okay. I will promise you I'll get to you. I just don't want to treat you differently to everyone else. So if I can take Councillor Lane's question next, followed by Councillor Duff's second question, please. Councillor Lane.
Thank you very much, convener. Stuart, the council's moving through necessity to be much more agile and putting resource where it's needed. The routes, I understand, as they stand, they're pretty prescriptive, and I can understand why that. I was concerned to hear about you're going to reduce the communication between office and operatives, because there's nothing more frustrating than if you drive from a rural ward towards Perth and you leave, quite rightly, Perth should be attended to and nearer to Perth, but you leave with 4 or 5 inches of snow, and by the time you get to Perth there's 0 snow, but whereas our resource is still doing the roads that have a lot less weather on them, snow on them, and we saw last week about how the weather patterns, they don't blanket PKC now, they can be very localised, and it can be the same with snow. My question is, how much flexibility do you have that if there is very little snow in Luncarty but a lot in Dunkeld, instead of going to Luncarty first, the resource goes to where the snow is?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lane. I take on board your comment. We do have fairly prescriptive routes, and the reason for that is to ensure that we're complying with the policy that was set out. There are issues in sending drivers to areas that they're not necessarily that familiar with, and we are currently looking at trying to address that by the means of new technology. We're considering at this moment in time that you can now add specific routes onto a sat-nav type device that you just put in the cab and, for example, press route 27 and it will guide you around that route, whereas previously we've relied on our drivers knowing the route or having a route card that takes them round the route. So with the advances in new technology, we would hope to give our drivers that additional flexibility of going different places, thus giving us the flexibility to send them and benefit the public in terms of the service we're providing.
Thanks. Can I follow up on that, please, convener?
Yes, you can, Councillor Lane.
Well, that makes obvious sense as Stuart, as resources becoming more and more limited. It should be targeted where we're going. Do you have a time scale for where we don't just follow a route because that's the route that's always been laid down, but we actually send the resource to where it's required? I think that would have to be a top priority.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Yeah, our guys, when they're out in the morning, although we're taking away the night shift control, we're not reducing the number of guys that we're bringing out in the mornings to supervise the activity and to assess where they need. So they always have a degree of flexibility, but there is a requirement to satisfy as we set out in the policy in terms of covering the network and that sort of order. As I said.
Sorry, Stuart. So we would have to change the policy. The elected members would have to change the policy before we can direct resource to actually where it's needed.
We wouldn't have to change the policy, but in the policy we say we'll treat the category 1 routes between before 7:30 in the morning. We've got defined category 1 routes, so we'd need to make these category 1 routes more flexible. And it's difficult. It's a challenge to do that when the guys don't know all the routes all the time. So the advent of new technology will allow us to make them more flexible in where they can go due to knowing the actual routes they're going on, because they're getting directed round it by a sat nav device, for want of a better term. So and we're looking to see if we can introduce that perhaps on a small scale this winter, but obviously, and if it's successful, just extend it through into next winter.
Thanks, because I cannot believe that we have to spend resource where it's not required just because it's set down in a policy. If there's no snow and no inclement weather in one part of even a ward and there's a lot in the other, surely it should be going to the other part of the ward first.
Yeah,
I have to
sorry,
interrupt here. I'm sorry,
yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I need to interrupt because I agree with Councillor Lang. Actually, I'm quite surprised. Would it be practical, rather than debating this issue, kicking it back and forward here and now? I'm perfectly happy to add that to my next conveners meeting, which will be in the next week or two, and consult with Councillor Lang about how we can try and resolve this issue. Would that be an acceptable way to try and move this forward?
Yeah, I would welcome that. It's not a political point at all. It's to get the benefit of the resource convener, and I'd be quite happy to come to a meeting with you if you'd invite me.
If everyone's in agreement, then can we? And Stuart, I sense you want to say something else, so do you want to go ahead and then we'll see where we go from there?
Yeah, I was just wanting to clarify that if there's no need to treat a route, we wouldn't send a gritter out to treat that route if there's no need to treat it. And what we're probably a little less flexible in doing is sending a gritter from Perth to Dunkeld to treat a route that's maybe requiring additional assistance up there, and that's principally down to the fact that the gritter drivers aren't as familiar with the route we'd be putting them onto. So we wouldn't treat a route that doesn't need treated at the expense of one that does. We're just not that as flexible as perhaps people might look for us to be, and putting additional resources into a route.
I'm sorry, Stuart and convener, but I have to say that to anybody looking at the outside, that means we've got resource lying idle when we're a PKC-wide authority. We have to send it to the area that it requires. We can't have it sitting idle when it's required elsewhere.
I think we've probably got into this as deeply as I want to get us into in this particular meeting. So if it's okay with Councillor Lang and with you, Stuart, and hopefully with Barbara, unless she tells me otherwise, we're all comfortable that we can park this immediately for now, and I will raise it through the conveners meeting process with Barbara and with Stuart, and in consultation with Councillor Lang, see if we can find a way to make what Councillor Lang thinks should happen, because if I understand the situation entirely correctly, and I may not at this point in time, I would agree with that. Is everyone in agreement that that would be a way forward?
Could I ask convener that was what the background behind what I was trying to get to with asking for an education session for elected members, so that we are aware of some of these issues and what they are, and how we're directing our resources so they're better managed within places that require them.
Okay, let's add that into the mix as well, to be discussed with myself and the vice convener and Stuart and Barbara at a conveners meeting as soon as we possibly can. Is that Does that satisfy Councillor Lane your concerns?
Yeah, it does, convener, but I would like to be included in that meeting.
I'll happily at least have a conversation with you about that, if that's okay.
Well,
Barbara,
I may move if I'm not going to be included, I may move an amendment that I can't accept this as it stands. Because if I've raised the subject, surely I should be allowed to, if nobody else has raised it, I should be allowed to be part of the solution.
I can see Barbara wants to comment. Barbara?
I am happy to meet with sort of elected members to be able to discuss this. My understanding, and I just asked Stuart to clarify that, sort of in particularly bad times, we will use all the resources that we need where appropriate. And I think it would just be helpful to reassure committee that, that nothing will stand idle if there is a particularly difficult situation.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, that is the case. The challenge comes when it's going to take an hour to move a resource to an area that will likely be completed by the time that resource gets there. And I think it's getting the balance right between unnecessarily moving resources about what is a large geographical area to assist something that may be on the verge of being completed when it gets there.
I'm sorry, Stuart, we're all council taxpayers in Perth and Kinross, and if we have the resource, we should be applying it to all regions equitably.
I agree with the principle of that. So if Barbara's happy to meet, so why don't we, after this meeting has concluded, if Councillor Lane is comfortable with this, we'll arrange a meeting with Councillor Lane, myself, Barbara and Stuart at the earliest opportunity to try and find a way that we can resolve this issue, which if I understand the situation correctly, I agree is something we should look at. Is everyone happy with that? And I look particularly at Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, convener. I appreciate that.
Stuart, are you comfortable with that? Okay.
Sorry,
thank you very much. Okay, thank you. And if I can maybe ask someone, presumably Barbara, to arrange that, but we'll talk about that later. Now I'm going to go slightly off topic and call in Councillor Stewart is his first question, so I'm going to move him up above Councillor Duff, just to keep everything fair and equitable. So Councillor Stewart, please.
Oh, thank you. I know that Councillor Barnacle wanted to come back in. I'm not sure if he was going to follow up on his question about grip bins, so I hope I'm not stealing his thunder here. I think my question is specifically about the grip bins, and I note that the media release accompanying the report today says that if grip bins need to be refilled for public use, and I know that we've got 1,300 of them across Perth and Kinross. The council is encouraging members of the public to let us know via the website using MyPKC service, and certainly I think people who use the MyPKC service find it very helpful. I think my question is, I have had reports in the past about requests for grip bins which the council has not been able to fulfil due to staff being tasked with other things. If we're relying, however, or asking communities to be self-sufficient, to do their own gritting with the push gritters, to do their own gritting from grit bins, how many requests for grit bin fills have gone unanswered in previous years? Do we know the scale of how many requests we actually manage to fulfil and how many we miss?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Well, I'll look to see if we can get that data from our call centre. I'm not sure how easy it will be to get it, but we'll look to see what data we can get back out from them.
Okay, I realise if there's not a mechanism for tracking it in real time, it might be difficult to go back and quiz for the data. But certainly going forward, I think it would be a useful thing to track. You know, particularly with the sort of Perth and Kinross offer, the self-reliance of communities. That trend, it would be a useful thing to track. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. So we'll move on now to the second question from Councillor Duff, followed by the second question from Councillor Barnacle, and then we'll draw questions to a close at that point. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I was interested to note that our activity was based on road surface temperatures rather than the normal forecasted air temperatures. I was wondering how these road surface temperatures were gathered and how widespread that measurements are taken, and wondered if Mr. Dahl could give us a bit more of the technical issues around it.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Yes, we have 7 winter outstations across the PKC network. They have cameras on them, they have surface temperature thermometers on them, they have they have wind speed monitors on them as well. And our winter forecast service provider, who are MetDesk, they draw information from these outstations that we have, and they also draw information from a wide range of other sources that they have themselves to predict what the surface temperatures are going to be in and around the local area, Perth and Kinross Council. We get a forecast based on domains, and we have currently have 4 domains, and we do an action plan at lunchtime based on the different forecasts for these different domains, be it high ground over 250 metres or lower ground.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. And our final question to Councillor Barnacle, unless his thunder has been stolen by Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. No, it hasn't, but I was going to ask something on that, mainly the cost of them, but we'll leave that just now. My thing is about picking up further on the briefing note that Councillor Simpson asked for in relation to the footway self-help, is really about farmers, paragraph 220. It's not clear to me where the coverage is. It says that they will only add farmers where presently there's little coverage. I wondered if we could get a similar briefing note on the coverage that's provided by farmers, so that areas where we think there's a deficiency, we could pursue that as elected members.
Stuart, your thoughts on that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Yeah, what we can do is we can wrap up a briefing note on general self-help, which will include the push along barrows and the farmers' help that we get as well. So yeah, we can encompass that in the one note to all elected members.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Right, thank you very much, everyone, for the questions. Thank you, Stuart, for the answers. I'm going to move on to moving this report, and I'm sure, like you, I was very, very surprised to see the cost of winter maintenance year after year, especially when we look back and saw what I thought was a fairly easy winter. But it's clear that an easy winter doesn't necessarily mean a cheap winter for us. So I'd like to move to support, thank everyone for their comments and contributions, and ask if I can have a seconder for this report, please.
I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments on this report? And if you have a comment, could you please type the word or the letter C in the chat box, please? Okay, I'm getting the feeling that everyone's comments, questions were answered through the question session. So can I ask if this report can be agreed? And I will assume that we are agreeing it unless you say otherwise. So I'll wait for just a few seconds to see. Okay, it would appear that we're all happy to agree this report. Thank you very much. We've had a fairly long discussion over this paper, and I have a feeling that we'll have a very long discussion over the next paper, paper 7, which is the Perth. Sorry, I've just seen a message. Thank you, Barbara, for that. I suspect that we're going to have another fairly long discussion over the Perth Winter Festival paper, so I'm going to hold just a short 5-minute recess comfort break for everyone at the moment. By my clock, it's 11:34, so we'll reconvene the meeting at 11:40, and I look forward to continuing the discussions with you then. Okay, I think we're probably ready to get going again if everyone is back in the virtual room. Right, let's move on now to paper number 7. This is the report on the Winter Festival, and as was already outlined at the start of the meeting, I'm going to ask Barbara Renton to say a few words about the press release which was sent out last week.
Thank you, Convener. The report makes it clear that it would be an elected member decision about the cancellation of the Winter Festival, and this was always the intention. However, it is with regret that, and I suspect as a result of the busyness of last week due to the flooding event, a press release was issued contrary to the recommendation contained within this report. As such, technically, it would appear a decision was taken last week while still under emergency powers, and I can only apologise for that. However, and Convener, I think it's for you then with the committee to decide, I would suggest that either the committee still makes the recommendation as the decision based on the recommendation as outlined in the report, or agree to change the recommendation to note that the decision was taken under emergency powers. Both of these would allow the committee to discuss the paper, which withdrawing it would not permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. This is obviously a very unusual set of circumstances, so I'm in the spirit of openness, I really would like to just get some views from committee members on how we proceed. I certainly do not want to withdraw the paper. I think it's important that we discuss it. I think the question we have to come to is, do we accept that that decision was made under emergency powers, or do we not? So can I just ask, just open it up to anyone who has a thought on that? Maybe just stick the word comment in the chat box and we'll run around. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. I would like to discuss the paper because there's actually points in the paper that refer to the ongoing Winter Festival, and though this year has been unique in the way things have gone, and I know there has been issues and maybe a wee error there, we still have to discuss certain points about how it affects businesses and how the Winter Festival is having an impact. I would like to at least have a comment or at least discuss that, because I'm assuming that at some point the Winter Festival will reinstate and we will go forward, and we need to know what's happening then. So I really would like to discuss the paper.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments on that? My view at this point in time is that we should take the view that the decision was made under executive powers, discuss the paper on that premise, and at least give everyone the opportunity to talk about it. So if anyone else has something they'd like to say, could you please pop the word C in the box?
I'm afraid my chat's not working. It's doing the same. It's failing. I actually sent a thank you note to you as well, and I don't know if that was the fact that I was thanking you for your support and allowing the flexibility that my machine's broken and it's not letting me send that.
That would be such a shock to your machine, Councillor.
Yes,
I would imagine.
And now it's not letting me send anything. So I fully support your position. Obviously, we should discuss it, but I think it was taken under executive powers and it was issued to the press and to the members of the public. So I think it should go down as a decision taken under executive powers, but of course we should discuss it and not withdraw altogether.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. That's a view I share, and I'm just going to wait for a few seconds to see if anyone else wants to make a comment or an alternative proposal. And I think I should specifically maybe ask if Councillor Bailey has a view on this, given that he was the one who raised the point of order. Councillor Bailey, if you're still with us, do you have a view on what you would like to do?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me clearly? My Teams is also playing up a little bit.
Loud and clear, Councillor Bailey.
Lovely. Yep. I appreciate the comments from Mrs. Renton and appreciate the background to this. And I think it is entirely appropriate that we still discuss the matter. But maybe when we get to the appropriate stage of agreeing the paper, we note that actually we're just agreeing that we've noted it rather than agreeing the decision, because the decision, as mentioned, has already been taken. So I'm in agreement with the rest of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bailey. It would appear then that we're in agreement that we accept the decision has been made and the paper now comes for noting. And just to make sure that we're doing this entirely properly, I'm going to ask committee services, excuse me, I'm going to ask committee services if that is an appropriate way to proceed. So if someone could give me advice on that, I'd be grateful, please.
Yeah, Convener, that would be appropriate in this instance. We would record it in the minutes.
Thank you very much for that. So in that case, we'll carry on as planned, and I'm going to ask Alan Graham to introduce the report, and then he can take questions thereafter. Alan Graham, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. As the members will be aware, each year a report on the Winter Festival is submitted to an early meeting of this committee, and it had been intended that this report would have been presented to the March committee meeting. The report outlines the background and development of the festival and its core elements, with particular summaries of the larger events, being the Christmas Lights event and the Riverside Light Nights, and outlining any year-to-year changes or developments in the programme, and a financial breakdown and estimated impacts of the event. In the case of the Christmas Lights event, based on the visitor survey data and the estimated attendance, the 2019 event, the net additional economic impact has been estimated at approximately 2.3 million. With regards to the Riverside Light Nights, a visitor survey was undertaken on the 2 Burns-themed evenings which opened the programme. For those 2 evenings, the estimated net additional expenditure generated has been calculated at 330,000. Under other circumstances going forward, it would have been proposed that the Winter Festival would be considered in line with the budget process and with ongoing engagement with elected members on the design and delivery of the Winter Festival programme. However, the present situation means that much uncertainty remains as to when and how large public events can resume. While it is clearly possible for the Christmas street lights to be installed as per usual, it is clear that events and public gatherings are severely impacted upon. It is anticipated that the guidelines regarding social distancing and operational measures will be such that it would be impractical to hold events along previous lines while still being compliant with public health guidance. Furthermore, the planning for the winter events requires a long lead time with other partner agencies' input, for example, Police Scotland, and consumer confidence as regards attending large-scale events is also in doubt. For these reasons, and as outlined in the report, it was therefore proposed that the Winter Festival programme events did not proceed for 2021. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Alan. Now we'll open up to questions. If you have a question on this, could you please put Q in the box, and I'll take them in order. Councillor McCall first, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. Yes, and as usual, an excellent report, and I do think the Winter Festival is phenomenal. I think we produced something absolutely exceptional in Perth and Kinross, but I don't want to keep going. So page 61 highlights the percentages from 35 businesses, with 33% saying that there was actually a negative impact on their business at this time. Is there any sector correlation between the 11 and 12 businesses that responded? I'm just trying to get an idea if that's a large section of business within Perth and Kinross, and what sector it is. Thank you.
Alan? Thank you, Councillor McCall. So we do have an overall breakdown of the respondents by category to the survey overall, but we don't have a further sub-analysis in relation to that particular question. However, it can be taken from the results that broadly the overall respondents are roughly about 50% independent retail, about a quarter of the overall respondents are from the hospitality sector, and the rest come from a range of different service businesses, convenience, retail, etc. So, given the very small numbers, one can only infer that it would be predominantly a proportion would be from retail and some from hospitality.
You okay with that, Councillor McCall? Before we move on to the next question, thank you, Councillor McCall. Before we move on to any further questions, I'm being advised that there is a problem with a lot of people's chat facility, so they're not able to request a question. So can I ask you, I think you'll just have to interrupt, and I'll try and juggle everybody's questions around. If I can maybe ask someone from IT, at the moment all I can see on the screen is the slide saying that the committee's on. I can't see a group of people, which would be more helpful. Is there any way we can change that? In the meantime, while someone thinks about that, Councillor Stewart has a question, but if anyone else has one, please just interrupt. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. I think my question is on finances. I note from the annex to the report that there are no financial resource implications as a result of the report and therefore as a result of the cancellation. Obviously, we're not going to be spending. Last year it was nearly £400,000 on the entire programme of events, and I was wondering what is happening to that money instead. Could some of it, for example, be used to support Christmas lights switch-ons? Well, not switch-on events, but support Christmas lights in some of our rural areas, small towns and villages instead this year.
Alan?
I think all that I can say at this juncture, revenue budget is obviously subject to review in line with the economic well-being and recovery, and it's a fairly fluid situation in that regard. I'm not sure it's necessarily in my gift to make a specific comment one way or the other at this precise meeting on that as to the efficacy of how the events budget overall may be reallocated or not, as the case may be. So I'm sorry to kind of fudge that specific answer at this point. I think what I would add is that we will obviously be giving what guidance we can in line with our regulatory services colleagues as to what small-scale community-based gatherings may be feasible in line with national guidance through rest of phase 3 and phase 4 of release from lockdown.
Okay, that makes sense to tie it in with the economic well-being plan. What is the actual budgeted figure for? What was the budgeted figure for the expenditure this year? The actual gross expenditure last year was nearly £400,000, with income of nearly 60,000. What was the budgeted spend for this year's events?
So we haven't even got to that level of analysis because of the circumstances we faced. And obviously, staff have been retasked onto other duties since late March.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Now, technology was working so well for us so far, but unfortunately seems to be failing. So I'm going to just sit quietly, and if anyone has a question they'd like to ask, if they could just start asking, please. Particularly want to ask Councillor Parrott, because I believe he is now joining us by telephone. Councillor Parrott, are you there, and do you have any questions?
I've got no questions at the moment.
Thank you. Right, it would appear that despite my best efforts, no one else has any questions to ask. So in that case, I will progress with this. And in moving the report, I think I just want to say that we are all bitterly disappointed to have to accept the fact that this event will not go ahead due to coronavirus, and I wish we could find a way to make it happen. But as we've heard, the logistics and the financial consequences to the public purse are just too great to risk. The Winter Festival has brought a huge benefit to Perth and the wider area over many years, and it's widely regarded as being one of the best in the country. And I'm sure we all hope that some sort of normality will return in time to get this back on the agenda for next year. And with that, I'm going to ask if I can have a seconder, and Councillor Baird, I believe. Yes,
thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. I'm sorry that technology has kind of failed us this morning as well for a short time here. I'm happy to second the report, agreeing with you. It's unfortunate the Winter Festival has to be cancelled this year, but I think it is only the proper thing to do, and I wish all little communities who have switched their own lights on do it safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baird. Are there any comments? And again, if you are able to type C, please do so. If not, please just start speaking.
Convener, it's Councillor Barnacle here.
Councillor Barnacle, please go ahead.
I tried to send a question, but it could be facilitated by a comment, really. Which
well, I I think under the circumstances we could take a question at this stage, Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, well, it's really for Alan Graham. Looking at paragraph it was basically the paragraph 212 showed the entertainment element of the cost breakdown of the Christmas lights event, and 211 talks about the features. Really, what I'm saying is something I've raised before. How much involvement of local artists and groups is there in this as opposed to national? Could we possibly, because I think local artists would also create public interest, and there's some very good talent in the area, and I'm just wondering if going forward we might look at that and possibly be able to save a little money on the cost but actually still get the benefit of a good turnout. I just wondered what Alan thought about that.
Thank you.
Alan, can you comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Yes, indeed. We've always put the emphasis on local performers, local acts, bands, etc., participating on the Saturday and also on the Sunday, I might add. And indeed, the King Edward Street stage has a particular focus for such groups who welcome the opportunity, and we do put a call out really from this time of year onwards under normal circumstances, inviting groups, etc., to come forward. So we actively recruit in that regard to get that right blend and that right mix, and that applies to both the what we call the main stage on Tay Street and the King Edward Street stage as well. But we are conscious of the need to get as rounded a package as possible that it attracts people from far afield as well as local followers. So we do have to get that balance right. Yeah.
Thanks very much. That's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. So we're technically in comments. Are there any comments on what we've discussed? I'll wait for a minute or two or 3 seconds and see. Okay, well, given that there appear to be no one else wishes to talk, I think we'll just agree that we've noted this paper. So I'm happy to say we've noted it unless someone says otherwise. I'll wait for a second to see if there's anyone has another opinion.
Agreed, thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone, and I'll pass you back to Councillor Baird to look after us through the last item of the agenda. Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Convener. We now move to item 8 on the agenda, which is the amendments of the list of public roads, which you have in front of you. As there have been no objections to these roads, and I presume communities have had the opportunity to have their say, are we happy just to agree the amendment to these roads?
Agreed.
List of roads. Is that
agreed? An
agreement from everyone?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Just a comment, Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to see these further additions to the list of public roads. I wondered if we could maybe just discuss the second part about of the recommendation about not bringing the report to committee in future.
I think that has already been agreed, Councillor Stewart. I might be wrong, but if you anything you wish to say?
It's that I recognise that you know, we never amend this paper. It is generally goes through on the nod. I don't object. I don't think to this becoming effectively, I suppose, a delegated power, and you know, look forward to the fact that the information of the additions will still be shared with elected members. What I'm just slightly concerned about is the notification to householders. So, you know, the additions to the list of public roads are, as I say, it's a small paper that always gets nodded through at the end of committee. sometimes, you know, the additions may get picked up in the press and reported, but if most of the applications come from developers, then households will not necessarily know that their house, that their street, on a new development that they've moved into, that their street, they won't necessarily know if or when it has been adopted, or that there's a proposal to do so. And I just wondered how we communicate that to householders.
Barbara, will you wish to comment and answer this question, please?
Certainly, Vice Convener. I think Councillor Stewart had raised this, you know, sort of a few years ago, and while this now doesn't sit within, you know, sort of my area of responsibility due to the move of planning and development management to corporate and democratic services, I'll pick this up again with, you know, sort of the team, just to make sure, you know, sort of that we are publicising this. I think Councillor Stewart was keen that we notified, you know, sort of through a mail drop, but that's quite resource intensive. But we'll make sure that this is sufficiently publicised, and I'll pick that up again with Peter Marshall.
Thank you. I mean, I know it would be resource intensive for us to do it, and I would expect, for example, normally the developers to do it. For example, however, if a developer went under during the development process and we were using the roads bond to bring up the road to adopted standards, it would be effectively the council who was at making the addition to the list of adopted public roads rather than the developer. So there may be situations where it falls through the hole, but I'm grateful to the director for her response on that point. Thank you.
Might I make a comment, Vice Convener? My comment button has failed.
Yes, that's okay, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice Convener. I think just very briefly, I'd like to comment on the Appendix 1. The last item, which is a private road in Collenhaw and Stormontfield. And just similar to my comments about the Community Challenge Fund, it does show that the unadopted roads policy does work occasionally. It's a very convoluted procedure, but I think this triumph in Collenhaw should encourage others who have the misfortune, like myself, to live on a private road to engage with council officers and try and avail themselves of the unadopted road policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simpson. Does anyone else wish to make any comment? Just please indicate. I don't see anybody wishing to make any comments, so thank you. Let's note this report. I will now hand you back to the convener. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Councillor Baird. That brings our meeting to an end. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance. I particularly thank the officers for answering all the questions and the elected members for asking those questions. I apologise that technology was letting us down just towards the end. I'm sure the IT people will be looking at that. But thank you for your attendance today, and I hope everyone keeps well, and I look forward to seeing you again.